Hey, Fred, we're all out of Pamplemousse LaCroix.
Copy you.
All right, so I want to start off by thanking Robert Willrich joining us today, line producer, like myself. So we're going to be having a fantastic conversation because we are obviously the smartest people in every room.
Absolutely.
or so everyone thinks we think.
Yeah, yes, of course, but we are.
Right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start off, I ask everybody the same thing to start off. How'd you get into it?
The origin story.
Yeah.
So this is, I'm going to make it as short as possible, but it actually goes
get relaxed?
Well, it goes back a ways. I grew up in a household that literally artistic endeavors were not really thought of as career-oriented endeavors. Okay. They were always hobbies. So, when you're a little kid and people ask you, what do you want to do? I remember the first time I was in elementary school, I said, I want to be an artist. And my mother was famous for, no, you don't want to do that. That's a hobby. That's not a career. And her famous words were always, you want to be a doctor or a lawyer. And so after high school, I was basically given an ultimatum. You can go to college and we'll help you go to college, but you have to go for some sort of a business degree. And nothing that I wanted to do would they back. So I was given the option to go to school or get a job and pay rent. So my father, my mother remarried to a stepfather, but my real father had a trucking company, and I went to school, or I went to work with him, and basically started a blue collar life. Was trucking, but we started delivering air freight, and one of the companies that we actually delivered for. When I first saw it, I thought it was pronounced Chiron, but it was Chiron. And so I was delivering Chiron machines to the studios. Oh. And I was smart enough to know not to go into a stage with a red light. But I was also curious enough and smart enough to know that if I walked around with a bill of lading in my hand, I could play dumb and just walk all over the studio. And so I walked on a set of Cheers. I walked on a set of Solid Gold. Like, I would just walk through the studios. And everywhere that I would go, if I saw somebody working on the studio, how do I get a job doing this? And every person said, you got to know somebody. You got to know somebody. So I just kind of gave up at a certain point. And I got a phone call from my sister one day, and she said, hey, they're looking for a PA. And I said, what's a PA? And she told me. I said, what do you do? And she told me, and I said, no. I said, thanks, I appreciate it, but no. Next day, I'm still at the same job. She calls me again, and she says, I really think you might want to try this. I said, what does it pay? And it was far less than what I was making as the landscape supervisor. Third day, she called me and said, I just found out this company has a full-time photography staff. I said, what is the company? And she said, it's the Miss Universe pageants. So anyway, she got me to go down. It was in Century City at the time. I went and interviewed with a man named D. Baker and Marilyn. I can't remember Marilyn's last name at the moment, but they said, okay, we're going to give you a chance. I showed up the first day. They introduced me to their operations manager, a guy named Don Betcher. And I sat down with Don, and he goes, hey, so we're going to Louisiana in 3 weeks. Do you know anything about trucking? And I said, a little bit. What do you need? And he's like, I got to get all this equipment over here. He goes, do you think that you could actually make appointments for the trucks, this and that? 2 hours later, I'm like, it's 5 loads, 48-foot trailers, picking these things up. Appointments are all made. It's all set. And he was just like jaw dropped. And, basically, like, how did you do that in 2 hours? I'm like, my dad owned a trucking company, And it was just the strangest thing. But everything he would ask me to do is something that I had done somewhere else. And so the hardest part for me was I didn't know how to make coffee, so I had to learn how to make coffee on the old school, big coffee machines. And it was a little different. I don't think PAs really understand at this point what it was like for us. Like, you were the first one in, you opened up all the offices. You put paper in everybody's printers. You put paper in the copy machines. You made the coffee. You did the dishes because there was always a kitchen in these. You did all of these things. You made sure that all the supply room was stocked and organized, and you did that sort of stuff. I've had people literally tell me, like, I didn't go to 4 years of college to go get people lunches. And I'm like, well, guess where we all started?
Yeah.
We all started getting people's lunches. You know what I mean? And it's like the people who get the lunches and they get them right and they do it with the right attitude, and those are the people that I'm going to bring with me to my next show.
Yep.
And I will move you up as quickly as I can if you keep that attitude and keep doing what you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
And I literally went from there.
Did you not have to go back to landscaping, or were you able to keep
I
rolling
did
for a while?
between, like, I would help out between shows.
Got it.
Literally, my second show was the Miss Universe pageant in Hawaii.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I have, a start that most people would love to have started out doing.
Yeah.
It was a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of good times as well. So, and yeah, that's basically how I got into it. And I worked for the pageants for 3 years.
How did you move up from PA all the way up into line producing and production managing?
Well, I was the PA. I was a PA for a year. Between the Teen USA and the next year's Miss USA, I did a pilot. Dan Funk introduced me to a line producer at the time named Meredith Fox, and I did a pilot talk show with her for Kim Coles.
Okay.
And I basically was working with the production coordinator, who went on to do great things. And I realized at that point that what I was doing at the Miss USA pageants was a coordinator's job. And so when I got hired on the next year to come back, I told the EIC of that company, I said, look, I'm not going to ask you for money. I'm not going to ask you for a title, but I want your honest assessment. Can you please tell me if I'm doing a PA job or a coordinator job? And those shows are live. So at the end of the show, I was watching the credits roll, and it rolled up and it said production coordinator with my name. And it was, that to me was like everything.
Nice.
So yeah, it was very cool. And I did production coordinating for a year before I got my first production manager job. And Meredith, who Dan had introduced me to, she was my first mentor in the business. When I was a PA, she would introduce me to people as a production coordinator. And then when I was a production coordinator, she's like, oh, this is the greatest production manager you're ever going to meet. And so she really helped me kind of, I was a PA for a year, a coordinator for a year, started doing my production manager. For a year, I was going back and forth from coordinator to production manager. Mm-hmm. And then basically I was a production manager for about 10 years. Okay. And then it took me a little bit to get up into line producing. And I've been line producing basically ever since.
Nice.
Going on my 28th year in the business at this point. So
there's always in production. There's always the last minute problem. Everything's about to go wrong. How compounded is that when you're dealing with a live event? That's got to be 10 times more stressful.
I think on a live show, and I one time had a coordinator ask me. He goes, "I don't understand how you guys did this before there was cell phones and email." And I laughed. I said, it was so much easier. It was 100 times easier because you had to have a good plan.
Yeah.
And there was only 2 or 3 people that could actually interrupt that plan and change it. So every morning you'd have a production meeting. You're going to do this. You're going to do this. You're going to do this. And if they didn't change it, you just stayed on that course.
Yeah.
And on a live show, you basically, equipment, you've got redundancy everywhere. So, rarely is it an equipment issue that you're dealing with, or if there is, there's a replacement piece of gear for it.
Yeah.
So, but it's more things like I said, somebody hurting themselves, somebody, like I said, air conditioning going out. There's always just small things. And really on something that size, the biggest difference is that you got to run. You know what I mean? It's like you're covering a big a distance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, so it's the same thing as any other show. I mean, the one thing I've found in 28 years is that most shows it's the same thing. I mean, you're trying to capture something and you want to get it to post so that they can edit it and tell a story.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's it adds a little bit of pressure, but it also makes it a little more fun if you thrive in pressure. Yeah.
In your mind, what was your best save?
You know, it was, I got out of my lane actually, probably at one time because we were doing a walkthrough, and it wasn't a save as like things were going to go wrong.
Yeah.
But I think that had I not made a suggestion, and at that time I was still a PA, and we were walking around, and you know, in a live venue like that, you're kind of trying to find places to put people.
Yeah.
And we decided, well, the stage managers decided that they should put these girls up in a crow's nest. And we got down, and I was like, should I say something? Should I not say something? And I pulled Dan aside because he was actually, you know, taking a liking to me at that point. And I said, Dan, those stairs leading up that crow's nest are graded stairs. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, those girls are going to be running down in heels. And he, good catch, you know what I mean? It was like, and he called the stage managers over, and they were actually, you know, they were like, that's good thinking. Let's move the band up here, and, you know, the girls are going to be over here. So little things like that. But, I mean, you know, like I said, every production you're on, there's always something that goes wrong, and it's just sort of, you never want to look panicked. You don't want the executives to think that something's going wrong. You want to be as calm as possible and, you know, take care of it as quietly as possible. So,
what do you feel is the most misunderstood part of your job?
I mean, you're a line producer. This is,
I haven't.
This has been, for me, dealing with crew. It's like they think that we're constantly taking money from them. And I've been told in 28 years, I can't tell you how many crew members have told me that I get a percentage of what we save in the budget. And I'm like, you guys have no understanding of how a budget works. Because if I come in under budget, guess what my budget's going to be next year?
Yeah.
So you want to come in on budget or just over budget. And that is the whole game. And I've never made $1.
That's the
not
thing
one.
is, when people say that to me, I'm always laughing. They're like, you got a percentage of that. I was like, let's be clear. I'll bring this thing under $1 million if you want me to. Nobody's going to get paid. There's no second season. And then think about it. It's like, it doesn't make any sense in this day and age, like how they paper everything. They're giving you this, and this, but you think I'm getting a kickback from that? It's like, think it through.
One of the things I hate is when somebody else does a budget for you.
Oh.
I did a live show one time, and I'm like, you guys don't have an AD in your budget. And I kept asking for the budget. We started it right around Christmas time. He's like, yeah, I'll get it to you. And I didn't get it until the day I walked in, and I started going through the budget. We don't have an AD. And he said, what do we need an AD for? I'm like, have you ever done a live show? I'm like, we got to send this to a central, you know, station that's going to actually run this out. And there's live commercials. We have to cut in and out of this show. He goes, well, can't the director do that? I'm like, no, he's directing. You know what I mean? And then I keep looking through the budget, and I'm like, you have no satellite or fiber feed. Like, there's nothing in here. Is the network paying for that? Well, I think so. And I called the network. No, we're not paying for that. You know, and I'm like, you're talking about minimum tens of thousands, and it could actually be, if it was satellite and you needed redundant satellite, you could be talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so, you know, when you get something like that, you know, somebody budgeted for, but they really weren't experienced enough to do that budget, and then you have to sit here and try and figure out how to make it happen. Or you have to have that big sit down, and it's like, you know, hey, you want to bring the executives in, let's bring them in, but you know, we got to come up with a solution. It's like,
my whole thing was, and it's I don't know what it's like with the genres that you're doing and things like that, but for my genres, the problem it was coming out of safety. You know what I mean? And when you're talking about putting people in situations as opposed, that's where you got to be like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's where I become liable, not just responsible, but liable.
Yeah.
And that's where, you know, some people, you know, when people are like, oh, you're just doing that, why would I do that with the money? Or why would I could be liable for things. You know what I mean? So,
well, and speaking of that, there's always somebody that's like, it'll be real quick, you know, and it's like, yeah, it'll be real quick, but the minute somebody actually gets hurt, you know, it's not real quick anymore.
I got news for you. Murder doesn't take that long.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? It's very quick.
100%. Yeah.
That's why you're like, no. Anytime somebody tells me it's going to be quick, it's like, yeah, that's the amount of time it's taken me to get in trouble. That's
Yeah.
how quickly it turns. You
Oh
know
yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
The one thing I've learned from being on lockup and doing all those prison shows was if you get the right group of friends, the right booze, and the right like significant other, you can do 20 to life in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
You can switch on a dime. You can just be like, wow,
Oh, yeah.
that went south.
Yeah.
But you just never know. What is one of the best lessons that you've learned working in production that you've been able to carry into your life?
Again, I would probably say patience. You know,
Nice.
I when I was younger, I had a very quick temper.
We all do.
Yeah.
All line producers do. That's how we're good at what we do.
Yeah, but you once you get up to a certain level and you're not allowed to anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
Of course.
Otherwise, you're liable for some sort of harassment or
Yep.
that was the one thing that I didn't like about climbing the ladder is that I felt that you had to remove yourself more and more
Of course.
from situations because now you're the parent in the room basically.
Yeah. Couldn't
So-
go to the rap party. Couldn't do certain
Oh,
things.
I
Yeah.
stopped going to rap parties quite a few years ago.
Decades ago,
because
yeah,
of
same
a-
thing.
Yeah, because of an incident that was an after party after the rap party. I walked in a door and basically I called over a couple people and said, "Okay, here's what you're going to do, and I'm going to leave,
Yeah.
and you're going to call me when these things get done, and then, never again."
Yep.
And I basically stopped going to them.
Oh, yeah.
People want to have fun, and I'm all for it. And when I was in positions that didn't, I wasn't held liable necessarily for anybody other than myself.
Yeah.
I was the one that was probably doing the things that I was going to get called into an office for. But yeah, as you get to have to bear that responsibility, it's definitely changes your perspective on things. But yeah, I would say patience. Like I said, even with family members or friends at this point, it's kind of like take a beat.
Yeah.
Take,
yeah.
take a nice deep breath and like think about what you're going to say before you say it. So yeah, I would say.
When you do these live events, do you have a lot of times? Do you have the audience attached to it?
That's always interesting because on a big live event, and the Miss Universe pageants, there was a woman that was her job was to seat everybody. And I don't even know if I should say this, but I worked when Donald Trump owned the Miss Universe pageants. So there was a lot of, I want this person seated here, and this person seated there. And I mean, I would just see her with this big chart, and again, before computers, and she would have Post-its, and she'd be pulling Post-its and moving this from here to there. Wow. Huge chart for everybody that was coming. So generally, I don't have much to do with the audience. Production at that point,
Yeah.
there's a whole separate department that's dealing with that. But where we do have to do with the audience is, I've had audience shows for years, and it's like if somebody passes out, you know what I mean? It's like the safety of the audience falls under our department.
Have you ever had something happen with the audience that has affected the show?
We did have somebody who was mentally, I don't know the correct word. I don't know if he was autistic or if he was, but basically had some mental challenges.
Okay.
Who freaked out in the middle of a show
Ooh.
because he was in a crowd. We have had incidents like that, but for the most part, it's
Does the mood of the audience ever affect the outcome of the show or how it's going on?
100%.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
How do you is there a trick to keeping them going?
Well, you got warm up people who are
Yeah.
trying to get them going.
Uh-huh.
But there's always challenges that come up, and sometimes certain hosts want a stage kept at 56 degrees, so everybody's freezing, and they got jackets and hoodies pulled over them, and we're like, no, you gotta lose the hoodie, and they're like, but we're freezing, The energy itself, if you have a host that doesn't show up on time, that can kill it. Your warm-up people at that point start getting very aggravated because they want to come in, and it's like they start 20 minutes before the show's supposed to start. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I got 20 minutes of material, and then if your host decides they don't want to come out for another 30, it's like all of a sudden this person's making it up. Exactly, yeah. So
Where are you from?
Yeah, but also like some of the things that have always cracked me up is that in TV land, in the magic of TV land, everybody wants to think that your audience is a great mix of people of color, white people, women, men, this, that, and it's like just doesn't work that way. I mean, I worked on the Lopez Tonight Show, and it cracked me up. Every time I'd come out to the audience, it looked like I was going to a family reunion. You know what I mean? It's like oh, okay, and it was just all Mexican, So that sort of, it's like you kind of want to spread that around to make it look like your audience is a little more diverse.
Yeah.
But the thing that always made me laugh is that those are the people that are his true fans.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like they're going to be the ones that are going to cheer the loudest. They're going to be the ones that are going to laugh the loudest. You know what I mean? It's kind of weird that people are so concerned about what the audience looks like at that point.
Yeah.
To me, it's like if somebody's funny, they're funny, and eventually those other people will come. That diversity will come.
Yeah.
But, audiences matter a lot.
What is the mistake that you look back on and just wish you could erase it from your memory?
I'm going to go back to the Miss Universe pageants. This was in Hawaii.
Uh-huh.
And so one day I was in the office and one of the executives came over and said, can you help me get this box to my car? And so I'm like, sure, what's in the box? And she said, trophies. And I went to pick up the box. This box was heavy. And I'm like, trophies, okay. Again, PA didn't want to ask too many questions, so I pick up the box, get it up onto my shoulder. I'm like, okay, where's your car? And, I didn't have a dolly or a cart or anything that I could put it on. We had to go downstairs and all these other things anyway. So it's like, where's your car? And we start walking, and she runs into another executive. And the two of them just start talking. And I got this box of trophies on my shoulder, and I'm like, well, this is getting heavy. I'm moving over to this shoulder, and I'm like, okay. And I literally was like, can you tell me where your car is, and I'll just go ahead and take them down? And she's like, it's too hard to explain, and then just keeps talking. And so eventually I was like, I got to put this box down. I mean, I would say that the box probably weighed 75 pounds minimum. And as I did this, everything just shot out the side of the box, and all I saw was glass shatter.
Oh.
And I was like, nobody said they were crystal trophies. But it explained to me why it was so heavy. But I mean, these were to be presented on air live, and I think I shattered at least 6 of them. And this was Miss Congeniality, and you know what I mean? It's like those are the trophies that they give out. And so yeah, they shattered. I got called into you have to understand, Miss Universe is an all year round company as well. So
yeah.
I got called into the president of the Miss Universe pageant's office, and her name was Molly, and Molly sat me down. She explained to me just how much what I'd done cost. She asked me what happened, and I tried to explain it away without, just also kind of tearing into the executive who was having me hold this, for so long. But I kind of told Molly, I said, look, if I need to pay for them, I'll be, you can take it out of my paycheck. It'll take years for me to pay this back at that point because I was a PA. And she was very, very nice. And she said, I'm not going to make you pay for them. You're not going to lose your job. But I want you to always remember this. And I have never forgotten that day. And I thanked her profusely because I thought for sure I was going to be fired. And literally changed the live show. They could not give out the trophies at that point. They couldn't get them replaced in that short amount of time. So they had to rewrite the show around my mistake. So yeah, that one was my second show ever, and that was a huge mistake that has stuck with me for 28 years now.
That's a good one.
Oh yeah,
that's an epic one.
That was not good. Not good.
You
at
can
all.
see the first one sliding out of the corner of your eye to this day, right?
Oh yeah. And then the stage managers during the show, they're like, "Oh, we don't have the trophies, huh?" That's right. The prop guys, everybody was kind of giving me, their little digs here and there.
What is one of your most memorable meals on set?
this kind of worked in our favor in a couple different ways. But in Trinidad, when you're out you get a per diem.
Uh-huh.
And at the time, and this was in 1999, the per diem to be in Trinidad in an outside country was $65 a day. But we figured out that you could eat and drink in Trinidad for $20 a day. But on I think it was the north side of the island, there's a beach called Maracas Beach.
Mm-hmm.
And they are known for, I believe they call it bacon shark. And there are these little huts. And a couple of the guys that I'd been with had been to Trinidad before. And they're like, you have to try these things. So we all took a trip out to Maracas Beach one day. And there's little huts. You walk up, there's a woman that has like a big, deep, almost like a wok, but bigger, filled with oil. And you order a bacon shark. And it was a flatbread. She'd take some dough, and then she would, make it into like kind of a ball, and then toss it into the oil. And then she would take shark that was caught right out in the ocean, and she would take shark, put it in the same batter, and then throw that in. And then she would flip it all until it was all a nice golden brown. And she would take the dough, cut it in, put the shark in, and then just there was some of the most fantastic tasting I don't know, condiments, what you would call them, but you could put lettuce or things like that in it. But they had these chutneys and there was just all these sauces. And the thing that was amazing about them is you would take a bite here and it would be sweet. You'd get like this nice chutney sweetness. And then you'd take your next bite and it would be spicy. And then you would take and every bite you took just had a different flavor, but they all just sort of melded together. And to this day, I've always told people, I'm like, if we could open one of those in LA, we would make, millions. One of the most delicious things I've ever eaten in my entire life. What was your favorite meal?
Mine? I think one of the better ones was I was on, we were shooting off the island of Aitutaki, and we were shooting a Survivor show. So just off, we would have like the island that's deserted or whatever, nobody's on. The main island's back here. Mm-hmm. And so we'd put them out there, and then we would be out there with them. So there's nothing to do really out there at night. The survivors are sleeping. But the water, you walk half a mile out and you're still not past your waist.
Yeah.
And then you hit the reef, which is just this cliff into the Pacific Ocean. And because of the moonlight and because of how shallow the water is, everything is like blue. It's like a light blue. So you can see everything. And what we do is we took these palm fronds, lit them up, and we walk out there along the reef, and then the locals spear fish right along the side there. Walk them back to the shore, parrot fish, just cleaning them and cooking them, and then we'd pull off palm fronds and we'd put the fish on the palm fronds, and we were eating and just drinking beer as the sun was coming up.
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
that was a pretty epic one.
Yeah,
that was a pretty epic one. Then again, I've had a burger and a taco where I'm like, it's the best freaking burger.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So
we've all been there.
What's your main thing to go to on a craft service table?
Red vines.
Really?
Yeah.
You were taking down all those red vines.
Yeah, I'm not.
Nice.
Craft service wise, it's like I always try to get something healthy, and craft service really changed. It's changed over the years.
Oh yeah.
And we had an incident on one of the shows I was on where our craft service got shut down. Completely by the health department.
Oh, I remember I was working an independent film in New York City, and it was, again, one of the world's worst craft service tables. But whenever the director and the DP had a problem, we would kind of group next to it and then solve the problem. But we were all smokers at the time. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of back then, that was the built-in timer. That was your built-in end timer. You have a problem, everybody lights a smoke, and the unspoken rule is by the time this smoke is done, whatever the solution is, that's what we're going with.
About 7 minutes.
Yeah, you've got that much time, and I just remember it was the world's worst craft service table, and every time there was a problem, it was also covered with a cloud of smoke to boot, because that's where we all went. So it was like, you're over there getting shit craft service, you're getting hit with the smoke all the time. It was like, looking back, I was like, I owe some apologies from that one. That one didn't go nearly as well.
Those are days I miss, though. Like in the Miss Universe pageant, there was a lawyer that actually worked there, and she smoked. And as a PA, she'd be like, Robert, come in here and let's have a cigarette. And it was so great to actually sit in an office and, I'm a PA, she's a lawyer. And I'm like, how'd you get to be an entertainment lawyer? You know what I mean? It's like, it was such a fun way to actually sit and learn something, because like I said, it takes about 7 minutes to smoke a cigarette.
Yep.
So you got 7 minutes to get as much information out of somebody, learn who they are, learn how they got there, take any advice they'd give you. It was always a great way to spend 7 minutes with somebody.
I feel I kept smoking longer because I was in entertainment, but I quit on a set in Mexico. I was on a Survivor shoot, 120 degrees in the desert. It was me and this executive producer, and the only shade was underneath this truck. So I'm underneath a truck at 120. I'm by the oil pan. Smoking a cigarette, like a Marlboro Ultralight to boot, right? Nothing even really that cool. I look over, and he's chewing Nicorette gum, and he's lighting one Marlboro Red with the other Marlboro Red. And I literally went, and I've been smoking my whole life. I was 2 packs a day at that point. I literally looked out, I flicked my cigarette out of him, I flicked my cigarettes out of him. I went, that's it, I'm done. He goes, what? And I was like, I'm not dying like you. I said, I've seen people smoke through their neck, and it didn't affect me. I quit. That was it. That's when I quit.
Well, if you're enjoying 120 degree weather under a truck, you have a different idea of enjoyment than I do, for sure.
I got to be honest. The best part of that whole thing was right next to us, the whole field where we were camping. It was all wild peyote.
Oh,
it was just, so we were all just cutting it, waiting for the last night, and we just felt like we were in Young Guns. But cool. It was a good one. But it was like, that was one of the good things about all the travel shoots for me, was we go into these remote areas, but a lot of times you were so remote, you'd get the shit that probably nobody would see, and it was like, hey, lick this frog. You're like, all right, I'll lick a frog, whatever, sure, I'll go for it.
Well, those are the things that I feel, those experiences make lifetime friendships.
Right?
You've experienced something with a small group of people, or it could just be one person, that everybody you're ever going to meet in your life has never actually done that. It's one thing to tell somebody about it. It's another thing to actually live it with somebody. And so I feel like on the Miss Universe pageants, to me, we used to say it was like we would have a family reunion 3 times a year, and it would always be in a different state and a different country. But it literally felt like, like these are my family. This is extended family at this point. I still talk to those guys all the time. We talk about, different nights that we had and the things that we did and the people that we met. And, it's like you don't, I still have friends that I've known. My oldest friend, we went to kindergarten together. We've known each other for 52 years at this point. And, I've done a lot of fun things with him, but he wasn't there for that. You know what I mean? And it's so I can call those guys and we can talk about that time. And to me, like I said, it's these memories that you share. And I think anybody who's done a traveling show, and like, especially with the things you're talking about, you're cutting peyote and doing stuff like that. It's like, you don't often get to do anything like that. You know what I mean? It's interesting you say that, because, as I told you, growing up, I was sort of told, like, this is, like I said, everything was supposed to be, doctor, lawyer, married, kids, and I felt like I aimed at that. My first girlfriend, I dated her from age 14 to 23.
Oh, wow.
It's like 9 years of my whole childhood. And then my next girlfriend I dated till I was 28 and 27 and a half. And it sounds completely cliche, but I was living in Long Beach, didn't have a whole lot of money at the time. And my roommate was a big reader. But one of the books she gave me was Kerouac's On the Road. And like I said, it sounds cliche, but to me, it just literally was like, boof. Like, there's a whole world out here, you know what I mean? So I had lived in this, like, just small I need to make this much money to pay my rent, and I want to meet somebody, and this and that. And I think it was about a year and a half, maybe 2 years tops, after I read that book, that I went to work for the Miss Universe pageants, and it was sort of like here's an adventure that I can go on right now, and they're going to pay for it. You know what I mean? It's like, this isn't even me. It's like, you're going to fly me where? The first night I went to Hawaii, I was the only one that went to Hawaii, and I was just, at one point I went out to the balcony of my room, and I'm watching the Pacific roll in on the beach, went walking down, it was just like there's a huge world out here. Why had I never paid attention to it when I was younger?
Yeah. That's the, back in the 20s, or the teens in the 20s, that was the railroad going through with the circus. And then everybody going, okay, I'm jumping on that train at the last minute when it's leaving town. That's what our industry is. We don't have that train going through. It's kind of a symbolic one, but that's what we're doing. We're jumping on to that moving scenario to be a part of that. Oh my God.
Yeah,
and again,
whatever it is.
But then you get there and you're like, shit, they're not giving the elephants water, like whatever it is. Like,
you know what
I mean? Like, you see all the shit behind, but it's that common thread that we all had, which is that adventure point of view. And again, whether somebody that goes into the network side, or whether it was somebody that went into the props or the armory or whatever, it was all coming from that same sense of, I want to run away and join the circus and have an adventure. And I always feel like that's the best part of what we got to do. What advice would you give to somebody coming into the business now, after all of what we've been through, after all the changes that are coming up? What would you suggest to people starting now?
Like, what's going on with the industry right now is kind of sketchy, but what I always told people, and especially anybody who's in production, is that I will take a person who is willing to work and not care about what time are we getting out of here today? Because I can teach you everything you need to know about this.
Yep.
What I can't teach you is a good work ethic. I think that you're either born with it or your parents raised you with it.
Yep.
I don't know. I had a guy that started out as a PA for me, and he was the only PA on a show that never once asked me, like, what time are we going to get out of here? He always came in and goes, hey, I finished that. What do you got next? And it was like, okay. And like I said, the word no, the first thing my sister told me, she's like, there is no such word as no. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She said, you don't say no, you say, if you don't know, you say, you know what, let me check on that and I'll get back to you. You know what I mean? But you don't just say no to somebody. Production is gotten to be a job that a lot of people don't want to do anymore because,
no shit.
we, to be honest with you, we get shit on all the time. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, anything that goes wrong in production, you know what I mean? It's like,
I always was good at it. I think I was always good at barking and making a deal. So the second it kind of presented itself, it was just an immediate fit for me.
Yeah.
And I just went with it. Yeah, it was always a good fit for me. But I had another underlying motivation, which was I didn't grow up with a lot of money or anything like that, but I wanted to have somebody else pay for me to see the world. So that was the other big push for me to start doing it that way. We've all gone to rap parties. We've all had an end of a show. Do you have any insane rap parties? What's your biggest memory of a rap party?
God, the ones I really want to talk about, I can't.
Okay.
To be honest with you, the first show I was on in Louisiana, we did a big rap party. And then I knew the next show was in Hawaii. And I had called my parents back here because we were in Louisiana. I said, I need you to do me a huge favor. And they said, what? I said, I need you to go get me a Hawaiian shirt and ship it to Louisiana for me. Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I need a Hawaiian shirt. And so I wore a Hawaiian shirt to our rap party in Louisiana. And like I said, the exec in charge at that point, his name was D. Baker. And I loved D. He was always running around the office singing show tunes and doing jazz hands. But he was just a really, really good guy. And anyway, he came up to me because he was the one that was like, I just don't think this is for you. I think you're way overqualified for this. And during that rap party, he came to me and said, I want to thank you for the job you've done. He's like, I know we almost didn't hire you, but he said, I got to be honest with you. You might be one of the best hires we hired on this show. And I jokingly said, well, I'm not wearing this Hawaiian shirt for nothing, D. And he just started laughing, and he goes, you're absolutely coming with us to Hawaii, So that was great because that was my first one and very memorable. And like I said, I literally
Nice.
at that point was told, like, yes, you're coming with us. We've done some rap. We had an insane one on Lopez tonight because they canceled that show short of what everybody thought it should have ran.
Yeah.
That one was insane because people got ripped and decided that they were all going to go home with pieces of the set, including the band equipment. We had to catch people like at the gates, like, you can't take that home with you. You know what I mean? It was sort of insane. Like, I'm a huge music guy, so like my favorite shows were always doing music.
I was never a huge music guy,
Yeah.
but my moments where I had musical interactions are to this day the most memorable thing I've ever had on sets.
So as you're saying that, I left Star Search to go do the Sharon Osbourne show. And I grew up being a huge Ozzy and Black Sabbath fan. So I remember the first day that Ozzy came on, like, I pulled out my phone and I dialed my friend. I'm like, you are not going to believe who's standing next to me. And so one of the greatest things ever for me was Elton John was coming on to Sharon. And Sharon was real particular. She wanted his room, like the dressing room, she wanted it all white. So we had to refurnish the place. We had to put pipe and drape so it was all white. And they made a huge deal out of this being a closed set rehearsal. So, I'm kicking everybody out. And it's like, no, he's going to rehearse, but it's a closed set. And I start to walk out the door myself, and somebody goes, wait. And I said, what? And he goes, who ordered the piano? I said, I did. He goes, then don't go anywhere. He goes, get right over here. Because if there's a problem with the piano, I need you here. And I said, okay. And I sat down in the front row, and I was 10 feet from Elton John. And Elton John, to me, like, I grew up, Betty and the Jets, and I just loved him as a kid. And so I'm sitting there, and he sat down at the piano, and he wasn't really promoting anything. And he's like, I don't know, Sharon, what do you want me to play? And Sharon was like, oh, in her English accent, she was like, oh, I don't know, Elton. How about you try this, and it's like, and she would name a song, and he would play about a minute of that song, and then she would go, or try this one. And she went about 10 songs, different songs, and he would just go from one song to the other. And I sat there on that stage, and I was like, this is incredible to me that I'm sitting, I'd worked with other bands, but of that caliber and that level, and to be as well known as he was, that was like, for me, that was sort of job altering, and I wanted, from that point on, I wanted to work on anything that had music on it. Can I tell you a quick funny story?
Yeah.
On Lopez, and I grew up, we talked earlier, 12, 13 years old, we were doing a lot of stuff we shouldn't have been doing, but I grew up listening to Cheech and Chong. My parents took me to go see Up in Smoke at the theater. You know what I mean? It's like me and my friends just cracking up at Up in Smoke. When I was on Lopez Tonight, they were going to be on the show, and the producer said, hey, I'm going to have them perform. I said, oh, great. I said, do I need to get, like, can you put me in touch with Tommy so I can get him a guitar and an amp and whatever else he needs? And he goes, no. He said he's going to bring his own. This is like 2 weeks before they're going to be there. Okay, I'll wait a week. Like, you sure you don't want me to get a guitar and an amp? And no, he says he's bringing it. Okay. A couple days before, I'm like, last chance, you want me to get him a guitar and an amp? Nope. Day comes, limo pulls up, Tommy gets out of it. I'm standing off, just kind of watching him. Producer starts to walk on stage. I go, hey, ho. And I stop the car, and the producer's like, what's up, Robert? I said, I didn't see a guitar or an amp come out of this car. Is it coming somewhere? Is it coming separate? And he looks at Tommy, and Tommy goes, oh, man. And Tommy's kind of just Tommy. You know what I mean? It's like, it's an act a little bit, but he's kind of just who he is. Oh, man, I forgot to bring my guitar, man. And so the producer looks at me, and I'm like, like, you know, we should have got a guitar and an amp. He goes, can you get one here? I'm like, okay, I'll get you something as quick as possible. I go and I call center staging. I'm like, guys, I got a huge emergency. I got a PA heading to you right now. I said, I need you to pull me a guitar and an amp for Tommy Chung. And they said, what kind of guitar? I said, he won't tell me if he plays Fender or Gibson or whatever. I'm like, can you just send me one of each? Yeah, I'll send you one. And he's like, I'll send you an amp that I think you'll be happy with. Great. So are you familiar with their albums?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Dave? The skit?
Which one is that one?
Yeah, man, who is it?
It's Dave.
It's me, Dave, man. I think the cops are following me, right? So PA comes ripping up with his amp. I have the amp, producer there. I'm like, got the amp and guitar. He goes, please take him into him as quickly as possible. So I go in. Who is it? And I'm sitting there going, is he doing this for my benefit? Because I want to just say Dave so bad right now. And I'm like, no way. Like, there's just no way. So I knock on the door again. Who is it? And I'm like, Tommy, I got your guitar and your amp. And who is it? And I'm just sitting there like, everything about me just wants to go, it's me, Dave, man. You know, open the door. But yeah.
Robert, I want to thank you for coming in today.
Oh,
thank you
you
so much for everything.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, did you have fun today?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was fun. Yeah, I like what you guys
liked
were
it?
doing.